Hello and welcome to Leading Sales, the only interview-based podcast where we discuss the challenges and experiences of two of the most critical disciplines in business today, leadership and sales. Our podcast brings together industry experts, thought leaders, and authors to share insights, strategies, and real-life stories to inspire and educate our listeners on the art, science, and the dynamics of leadership and sales. And now, your host, George Gallas Sr.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to Leading Sales, the podcast where we explore the art and science of leadership, sales, and the mindset behind meaningful success. In today's episode, we're going to enjoy a fun and inspirational talk with Michael Atkinson, a senior executive with decades of experience in leadership roles that go from full P&L responsibility to overseeing global sales organizations and leading teams through growth, transformation, and complexity. What makes Mike especially compelling is not just what he's led, but how he's done it, operating at the intersection of leadership, sales execution, and culture. Today's conversation will focus on those two core practices: how leaders develop themselves and others, and how sales organizations actually perform when strategy meets reality. Welcome to the program, Mike.
Thanks, George. Happy to be here. And it's a pleasure to see you again.
It's a pleasure to see you too. So, Michael, let's start from the beginning. Let's introduce our listeners to who Mike Atkinson is. Tell us about your beginnings. Where do you come from?
Oh, thanks, George. A long, eclectic career. I think of it split into two halves. I spent the first half of my career in the built environment, in the physical environment, literally starting on construction sites, supervising union pipe fitters in one of my very early jobs, fascinating job. And then in the second half of my career, working in the technology space and more in the virtual environment, both creating, running, and selling software technology. First, back into that built environment through an estimating and engineering system. And then, as you know, later on in the electrical industry with real-time operation systems, and then, expanding back out a little bit into that built environment with, some of the componentry also required in that electrical system. So
nice. So you were born and raised in the U.S. What part of the country were you born in?
So I was born in Colorado, and I was raised between the U.S. and England. I spent 4 years as a child in England. One of my secrets is I used to have what I consider to be the perfect English schoolboy accent when I was 8. When I came back to the U.S., I wanted to lose it because, since I already had a rugby ball and a cricket bat, the neighborhood kids were making fun of me that I was not an American. Fast forward to high school, that accent would have spackled over many flaws in my personality. So raised on the East Coast and, England, as I said, and then I have worked and gone to school up and down the East Coast, had children in 3 different states, and I have at this point lived and worked in 11 different states overall. And I'm currently coming to you from my favorite location in the U.S., the Pacific Northwest in a suburb of Seattle.
Seattle. Well, you will tell us later why you love that city so much, but also I understand, Michael, that you are currently retired. So tell us a little bit about that transition. When did you retire, and how tough was it for you to make that decision, and how's it going so far?
I don't use the R word. But yes, I have, as I say, I've stepped away from large corporate work, and I did that at basically the end of August of 2025. The transition has been relatively easy. And you could ask my wife, and she might say that's a lie. But I was never wrapped up in what I did, and it wasn't who I was as a person. The thing I do miss is the interacting with people, and there were some phenomenal people that I got to work with, and I miss that the individual dynamic and that group dynamic. But I've also kind of fallen into something else that I've been working a little hard in, which is why maybe not the retirement word, but it is essentially taking a hobby of mine and very possibly making it into a very small business. So
Just to keep things fun, I suppose. And yeah, I'm with you on that one. Using the retirement or the R word is difficult emotionally because you, like me, are a very active person. If somebody asked me, can you define Mike? I would say Mike is personable, very professional, very fun, and somebody with a lot of personal likings. You are always enjoying many aspects of your personal life, and your life was never all about work. You put people first many times. You put your personal life in the forefront of your everyday, and you made it fun for everyone. And I think that speaks a ton about who you are, and it also explains why you refuse to use the R word.
yeah, it's and who knows? You never know what's going to happen in the future. But yeah, you used a term as you were coming into this, talking about meaningful success, and I think meaningful success to me is where both the person and a business and a team can all succeed together, and it may look a little bit different for each one, but it's I've been lucky enough to get to put my stamp, my personality onto organizations, and for me that's meaningful, and it's allowed me to have professional success that aligns very well with my personal values.
And you spend a considerable time running projects in technology businesses, and then you also run sales. So you understand sales very well and the challenges of that practice. And then obviously you transition from being a manager to a leader. Can you tell the audience what are your thoughts when it comes to explaining that difference between being a manager and becoming a leader and the challenges that come with it?
I think the difference is profound and poorly understood. And I'm not saying can fully articulate it or understand it, but being a manager is much more transactional, I think, than being a leader. Being a manager, you're responsible for people. Being a leader, you're responsible for people. But being a leader, you're also truly responsible for culture. I think as a manager, maybe the difference is culture gets handed to you and you apply it. Being a leader, you are redefining culture with everything that you do, whether you know it or not. And the key is to understand that you may be doing things you don't know. You may be setting culture that you don't know or don't understand, don't mean. And for me, that is the difference. And I have always, I hesitate to call myself a leader, but I have always leaned much more toward leadership than managing, just because I think it brings the more fun aspects in. And when you're managing somebody, it's easy to manage them in a way that's good for you, good for the company. When you're leading people, you have to lead them in a way that is good for them, good for the company, and good for you. In that order, I think.
In that order. I like the way you put it because basically you said something very interesting. You are affecting culture whether you want it or not and whether you know it or not. And so the more aware you are of the fact that as a leader you are affecting culture, the better the outcome will be. Now, I was talking to Shannon Cassidy a few episodes back, and she put it this way. She said, true leaders should be focused on taking care of the environment and not focusing so much on the task. And she used this beautiful analogy of of the fish tank, the leader should be looking after the water, making sure that the water is nicely balanced so the fish can thrive. And you said it in different terms, making sure that you are concerned about the people, number one, that they succeed, that they are taken care of, and then the business, and then yourself.
I like Shannon. I've read some of her books. I'm a bit familiar with her. So
Yes, I know. We're both familiar with Shannon, a great friend of ours. And so how did your understanding of leadership evolve and change as you progress in your career? You had your first opportunity to get your feet wet with managing people and managing teams and taking some P&L responsibility, maybe at the project level, then later at the business level. And I'm sure you were learning as you went along. How did your understanding of leadership evolve, change as you were growing in your career?
it definitely evolved. I've had a few different spots in my career where things changed for me, in my perception and my understanding, change. I had an epiphany. Yeah, and I mentioned union pipe fitters before. My first job remains one of my top 3 favorite jobs. And when I came in, we did, as a company, we were, construction managing a very large modernization and expansion at a brewery in New Jersey. And it was, fascinating, but through, just normal practices, we managed to drive our largest subcontractor out of business. He'd signed a contract he didn't understand. We held him to it in ways that we didn't understand. He went out of business, and suddenly we had a big job that we needed to self-perform. And, the field engineer, such as myself, who've been running around looking at drawings and going, oh, this might fit, this might not fit, goes into his office, changes some things, sends out paper to somebody who then makes it happen. That changed, and it became that I had a crew of pipe fitters that I needed to run around with and determine what needed to change. Big Round had to change it, and then, the point that I didn't realize was going to be difficult, get them to do it for me. And it was there that I realized that all the knowledge in the world, and I was a fresh engineer, I felt really good about what I knew. I thought I knew everything. Every engineer does. You come out and suddenly you realize it doesn't matter what you know, because if the people in the field who are fitting and welding and hanging, and if they don't do it, if they don't want to do it, if they don't want to do it well, you got nothing. And it was interesting because it was also the first time that I was in an environment where there was no illusion that they had any respect for me coming in. I was a fresh engineer, fresh meat. They'd seen my type before. And they were putting me through the paces and testing me, and I believe I passed. But it was interesting, as it was that first transition to what, this world isn't going to be about me. It's not going to. I am not necessarily going to be able to personally and individually do the things that are going to create success. I have got to do it with other people, and I've got to do it with other people that don't necessarily think like me, come from a very different background than I did. And how do you relate to them? How do you get them to relate to you? And that was the beginning of a long journey towards authenticity, right? How do you show yourself? Because people respond well to it.
Yeah, basically everything you've just said, I think I read it defined by an author as leadership is the art of getting things done through others. And it may sound simple, but as you were describing your experience in your early career, basically making us all think about the true challenge and the difficulty of getting things done through others is not as easy. It's inspiring people to take action, to move, and people can get the job done, but with different attitudes. They can do it with joy, they can do it happily, or they can do it with the opposite feelings. And there's nothing worse than a contributor that hates her job. You want a contributor that it gets up in the morning happy about what is about to come every day. And that is true inspiration. And that's the sacrifice that we as leaders have to make in putting ourselves in the back seat and putting the people in the front seat and making them feel that the most important individual in the organization, in the team, or in the business, because they truly are. And
it is not about you.
Exactly.
You got to be thinking that at all times.
At all times. And that is a chip that needs to be replaced in our heads. It's not about us, it's about them. As Shannon said it, let's take care of the environment and the fish will thrive. Interesting. Thank you for that, Mike. Let's talk about sales a little bit. And everybody uses that same term or phrase that we're all in sales. Sales is everybody's responsibility, but very few people truly understand the concept. And we have to go back and remember that buying is, in essence, an emotional process.
The lizard brain.
Exactly, the lizard brain. And because it is an emotional behavior, we also need to realize that buyers, customers, we ourselves, when we buy something, everybody, human beings at the most basic level, they make purchase decisions for one or two reasons, either because the pain is so great they have to buy, or because the pleasure is so good they want to buy. And those are the only two reasons. And if you think about it, and I'm talking to my audience here, if you truly think deeply about it, and you can listen a lot more about this in my episode with Michael Vickers, people make buying decisions for one of those two reasons. The pain is so great, I have no option but to buy, or the pressure is so good that I want to buy. And that's what you were talking about. It is everybody's responsibility. So our job is to make that customer-vendor relationship good at all times, no matter what your role is, what your function is, or what time of the day you're interacting with the customer. It can be at a personal level, at a public function, or it could be in a meeting. But your role as an employee of the organization is to make that relationship memorable. It has to be positive. You have to be likable, and you have to remember that every word you say is going to have an impact on that emotional aspect in the buyer's mind. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And so I agree. People buy because of pain. People buy because of pleasure, but they will always buy in the manner that is most supportive to them. Always. And I know in one of your previous episodes, you talked about, I don't know if it was with Michael Vickers or not, but the beta versus VHS example back in the day, which, us as me certainly as an old person, we got to quit talking about those things. There are people that don't know what tapes are. But it was not the superior technology that won. They made everything around that technology easier, and that's what won. And I think selling is the same thing, because as a project manager, as a design engineer, anything you do to make the experience that the customer has just a little bit better gives you a chance at, hey, listen, you know what? We need some new stuff done. We can do it as a change order, as opposed to, we're going to do this new thing and we're going to put it out to bid, and we'd love to have you bid on it with us. It is definitely an art. It's soft skills, not hard skills, but it's critical.
Yes, and the more complex the environment, the more complex the product or the solution, and the more complex the procurement process, the more complex the transaction, the harder it gets to influence those souls, those hearts, to influence that emotional trigger. It gets harder. When you're selling, I don't know, any widget, a phone, a laptop, or a pair of shoes, you only have a small window of opportunity. You have 10 minutes to become the preferred vendor there is of that widget. But when you are in a multi-month, perhaps years-long buying process, you have more time, but at the same time, the decision-making process is much, much more complex, right?
Very.
Okay, let's talk about performance, Mike. So we talked about people and how leaders should be taking care of those in their charge. How would you say you went through and what lessons did you learn when you had to deal with metrics that were not going in the right direction, either in sales or in execution, where even though the team was cohesive, you felt that you had the right individuals in the right place, but the numbers were not heading in the right direction. How do you cope with that?
That's always difficult. I come from the school of thought that you feel it before you see it. So you see the progress towards what the numbers will become before you see the actual numbers. So you're doing the right things before you see the numbers. You're not doing the right things because the numbers are existing, which makes it, a bit more challenging, one, to make sure you're doing the right thing, but two, to explain to a larger organization why the right things are happening. And while you're on the journey to the numbers being met, the metrics being correct. I think I talked about it early on. I always wanted to lead an organization that was replicable, that was sustainable. And as such, there's things you can do in the short term that will pump numbers up and boost metrics and make a lot of people who don't understand things deeply happy. Good, we hit a number. This is what we're looking for, because at the end of the day, that's how we get measured. But I think running an organization, balancing a piece of that with, are we doing the right things in order to hit that number, right? Because if you're not doing the right things and you hit the number, there's a really good chance you don't hit the number next year. If you're doing the right things, there's a really good chance you're going to get to that number the next year and the year after that and the year after that. Because the key is doing the right things, doing them the right way, making it an environment where people want to succeed and have an opportunity to succeed and can see that the business is supporting them. And in reverse, they then support the business, which is why I talked about take care of people, take care of the business. At the end of the day, it takes care of you. And again, I do think that order is important. But yeah, the most difficult times are when you're not hitting the numbers and you think you're doing the right things in order to get to those numbers. Because, then you have a lot of internal selling to do. Hey, no, we need to stay the course. I'm talking to, management and boards of directors above you. When you're not doing the right things and you're not hitting the numbers, it's easy. You start to change things. And my philosophy on change. Most change should happen as quickly as possible. There are key moments that you need to understand that you need to get it right. You need to make a change and do it right. There's a lot of things you can just change. Okay. And then change again if you need to, because at the end of the day, they're just not those critical, and I've always talked about a handful of times a year. There's something truly critical that you need to make sure gets changed properly. So when you're not doing the right things and you can feel that and not hitting numbers, it's a much easier environment than when you're doing the right things in that transition phase. We've got things set up right. Now we just need to build that momentum. We need to get to that number because, it's arbitrary. Budgets are arbitrary, but by the end of the fiscal year, be it December, March, October, or September in the government's case, that's the point. Were we successful? And looking at that entire year may not be indicative of where you are in those last 2 months of the fiscal year and where you're going to be coming into that next fiscal year, and being able to understand where you are, being able to sell where you are, and being able to give a larger company confidence that that you're on the right path and that you will be, achieving success. It's a difficult thing to do.
Yeah, I fully agree. It's a difficult thing to do because businesses, by definition, are not patient. They are in the business of making money. And it's pretty difficult to have patience when you have to deliver value to the shareholders. And that value needs to be perceived at all times, or at least at most times. But unfortunately, when implementing strategy, there's a trial and error approach to many things that we do. And there's things that work the way you were describing it, and sometimes things do not work. But if you're taking the right steps and if you're doing the right things, and if you're truly committed to the strategy, things should start working out. And yes, we're focusing on sales, but let's not forget about the other aspects of business, right? Delivery, whatever it is, you're delivering a product or a project or a service to a customer. Are you hitting all the KPIs? Are you delivering your product or your service on time, with quality, with customer satisfaction, and with profitability for the business? A pretty difficult equation to maintain. I don't know what you think, but to me, a happy customer will always trump whatever difficulty. If we have difficulties hitting our internal KPIs and then we end up with an unhappy, dissatisfied customer, that's the worst situation, right? You can always repair your performance if you have a loyal, committed customer. You can always come back and you can always recover. But a customer that is ready to leave this relationship, a customer that is ready to divorce you from the relationship, that's not a good point. Were you exposed in your career? Were you exposed to situations like that where you knew you were doing the right thing and then you saw how the discipline brought the KPIs, the numbers actually came through? Or you kept a customer happy and in the end, you managed to deliver the business and make everybody happy?
Yeah, it's the way I've always put it to my teams is, we can't make our problems our customers' problems. And one of our problems is, or could be, hey, we're losing money on this project, but we're going to complete the project. And we can either complete it with a happy customer who will probably work with us and get us more work, or we can complete it with an unhappy customer who is, against us all the way, right? And being against us, overcoming that kind of resistance ends up costing money as well. So yeah, no, I've been in a position like that, and any number of times I took over, a new role, halfway through my career, and suddenly a project that got sold right before I showed up, we found out that we were going to lose $4 million on it, and the project wasn't that big. and I remember finding that out and thinking, oh my goodness, because it was one of the projects that I was excited about that they just signed, that I was, that was going to help us in this turnaround that we wanted to get going. And suddenly we had a big problem. And we had to work through that problem a couple of different ways, including that internal, direction upwards, which is, what, we shouldn't sue the customer, for example. Because frankly, we were wrong in that particular instance. And we shouldn't try to deliver as cheaply as possible to the customer, because they were going to see it, they were going to recognize it, and they were going to start holding us to the contract in ways that maybe wouldn't make sense for anybody. And so I had to have an internal conversation about that. I had to have also let's take this situation and distill it down to how did we get here so that we can quickly change the things in the rest of the organization with all the other 50 projects that were getting ready to go on or were ongoing, so that we don't replicate this problem in a much, much bigger way. And then lastly, how do I sit down with the customer and explain, listen, we've got ourselves a problem here. And I don't want our problem to become your problem, and I'm going to need some help, as it were.
Yeah, I think you're hitting on something very important there, Mike, and thank you for sharing that story with us. We tend to forget, those of us who work on the vendor side of the equation, we tend to forget how customers feel and how they are measured in their own jobs, right? We think that we are the only ones being measured, we, the vendor, the supplier, but then the customers are also measured internally. And in many cases, when we're dealing with decision makers, they are always on the line. Their neck is on the line for the decisions they made, or at a minimum, the decisions that they influenced before. And every day they come to work with what mission is to prove to their company that their decision was the right one, that the vendor that they selected or voted for was the right vendor. And it's our job as vendors to support them and help them succeed in that endeavor. to, at the end of the exercise, come out successfully. And that's why it's so important for delivery teams, being engineering or whatever product or project or service you're delivering. It's so important to understand success the way the customer defines success. The problem is that we tend to define success by the way our companies define success. Profitable, on time, on budget. True. That's one side of the equation. The other side of the equation is how do customers define success? And it's very simple. Let's talk about coaching. I'm sure you've had plenty of opportunities in your career to be surrounded by people that taught you something, that mentor you. And I'm sure you're thankful to them the same way many of us are thankful to you for what you've done for us. How would you help? And it gets on a more important meaning when we put in the perspective of what we discussed earlier here. We take care of the people, we take care of the environment so people can thrive. One way of taking care of people is coaching them, helping them grow from point A to point B, helping them define their goals with their careers. What is it that you want to be 5, 10 years from now? Is there any way I can help you get there? Can I share my experiences with you to help you along the way? Can you tell the audience a little bit about your experience with coaching others?
Yeah, I think coaching is one of those things that happens even when you don't know it is. It's a little bit like culture. I learned some tremendous things from people early in my career who would say, I never spoke to him. How could he have learned something from me? And I'm not necessarily saying they were all good things that I learned. But as a leader, you are teaching and coaching with everything that you do. Every interaction you have, you're leading an organization. Every interaction you have with anybody in that organization is an opportunity to provide a little bit of coaching without them even knowing it. Because, setting the right example is coaching. Responding the right ways is coaching. Showing that you care about a person, a team, is coaching.
Hey, Mike, let's take a break from the core of the conversation and let's talk about you for a little bit. We all have hobbies and passions outside of work. Tell us your relationship with music. Tell us about that first. Is music one of your passions?
I do like music because it's a universal language. It's much more unstructured. Corporate life, very structured. Music, unstructured, but it sends messages. It helps build culture, and it shakes people up in a way, when they start hearing it in a way that is different than what they go through on a day-to-day basis. In my relationship with music and bringing it a little bit more into the workplace, started in a leadership development class I was in. It was a session on how do you lead brainstorming. And for me, the music was the same way. And I always tried to, one, it's fun. I like to present, a workplace should be fun. You spend too much time in it for it not to be. But it was also a way of, we come into a meeting with all of the pain and weight of the organization and the angst of what we're going through on a daily basis. And we come into a team meeting and we carry that with us. And presenting and starting a meeting with, music and a little tiny message, but it was just a way to make people think a little bit differently. You kind of shrug, you relax, and now the conversations you have after that, become more real. And honestly, the using it in the team meeting in a way to sort of shake up, people's thinking and get you out of the box that we'd put you in or you'd put yourself in. It was a way of doing that. And honestly, the thinking and the research, it was fun for me. And it's important that I have fun in an organization.
So what other passions do you have? What else is Mike passionate about? What's keeping you busy these days?
Well, one of the things I love about the Pacific Northwest is I dragged the family out here back in it is 20 years ago, in 2006. A much younger set of children. All those 3 children who are now fully grown and in careers are in this area. So it's one of the things that I love about it. They love it. I love it. The other thing that I really like a lot to do outside is boating. And in the Pacific Northwest, there is just a stunning amount of water, and you can do it just about any day of the year because it really never freezes either. So yeah, it's my goal was always to spend a lot more time boating when I stepped away, not the R word. And I'm doing that. And I'm getting a little bit more deeply involved in, a little boating, adventure, a couple different boating adventures. One will be bringing a large boat around, a portion of the globe to deliver it from the East Coast to the West Coast, and the other is just getting, a smaller boat that we can use. We're lucky enough, we live, pretty close to a lake, and we can use year round on that lake and outside even into the salt water, because it's connected through a locks. But yeah, no, it's a life that has a lot of boating in it, has a lot of interactions with my family and children. That'll keep me pretty happy.
It's a nice way to spend some free time for sure. And I'm a water lover myself. I don't boat, never have. I have been in boats, small, medium, and very large ones. But no, I don't consider them a passion the way you do, but certainly enjoy it. Now, let's
Before you go on to your next thought, if I can interrupt, sorry. I know it's your podcast. There is a tremendous amount of scientific study out there that highlights that even just the sight of a body of water a day reduces blood pressure and other vital markers, or improves vital markers for all of us. We respond to water, as you think about it. We come from water. But we respond to water in a very positive way, being on it, seeing it, whatever. It has a positive effect on our physiology.
I have to agree with that. I was born and raised in a small town, oceanfront. I could not see the ocean from my parents' house, but it was just a few blocks away. So in minutes, I could be in the water. And when I moved to another city without an oceanfront, it just made it very difficult for me. And I couldn't wait to be by the sea again. And I do enjoy seeing it. I rarely swim in the water, but I just have to see it. And sometimes, believe it or not, in my home office, I have a TV on the wall. And what do I put on that TV when I'm in meetings? Ocean. I put ocean views on that TV because they're soothing. Those images are soothing. You're absolutely right. Now, I'm sure I haven't checked with you, but I'm sure we're going to coincide on this. When you're having a nice meal and the meal calls for a glass of wine, do you go red or do you go white?
I go red if at all possible. Yeah, even with fish, I'll go light red. But yeah, I tend to gravitate more to the red wines. My wife does not. And so I am drinking more white wines these days, just because one should not finish a bottle like yourself. And if she's going to drink white wine, hey, and honestly, I'm finding more and more, whites along the way that I also, really enjoy. But yeah, no, I tend to go red.
Nice. So we're getting to the end of our podcast. Mike, thank you again for accepting my invitation to spend time with our listeners. One last question for you. What do you believe most leaders know about leadership and or sales, but they fail to consistently practice?
Everybody really knows how important it is. And because it's a little bit amorphous, it's easy to ignore it at the times when it's most difficult. And conversely, at the times I believe it can help the most. It's, you know what? No. Yeah, we gotta hit that number. We're going to do this. We're going to hit that number. And then we'll get back to doing things the right way, perhaps. And I think that it's easy to step off the curb. It's hard to get back up on it sometimes. And again, as I talked about earlier, understanding the potential lasting impact of, okay, you know what? In order to hit this number, it's okay to step off that curb and not do things quite the exact right way, the sustainable way. But we wouldn't do that again. We're just going to hop right up on the curb. That is not necessarily the message that you've sent to anybody. So yeah, I would suspect that, everybody, understands because, it's been drilled in them leadership is important, but they don't understand how endemic it is and how it, literally oozes through everything you do, every interaction you have, every process that you've set up. And so, yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing.
And I want to ask you to leave a message for our followers. You had the discipline over your career to prepare yourself for the day that you were ready to step away, as you said, not to use the R word, but you did it a little earlier than the law dictates. You didn't wait for the right age. You're not 65. That's what I'm trying to say. And, and so you were disciplined. At the same time, you had the courage to make that decision early on, because I don't know the reason. I want you to share with the audience, if you may, what reasons led you to decide to step away and get into other aspects of life, step away from the corporate life. But of course, you needed some comfort before you could do it. And so that's why I'm saying you were disciplined, and then you had the courage to do it. Can you leave us with that message, please?
Yeah, discipline's important. I've been planning for my retirement since I didn't hop on it as early as my dad said I should when I was 23. But by the time I was 30, I was planning for what am I going to need and how am I going to get there? And as your standard of living changes, those projections change as well. But yeah, I was always, chasing a future where I could truly make the decisions that I wanted to make for myself, as opposed to being in a situation where somebody else will be making those decisions for me. So yeah, I've been lucky, right? I've had a charmed career. I've managed to get compensated well, and that has all helped in what I'm doing. But I've also had a pretty clear goal as to what my retirement might look like. And I learned, I was chasing that retirement, number, as it were. If I had this much, I could at this age, I could step away. But it was interesting. As I got closer, you realized more and more it was that there isn't a magic number. It's a combination of a lot of different things. And it's not a when question. I want to retire by the time I'm 60 or 64, or in my case, step away when I'm 62. It's a how. How do I want things to go after I retire? And what's that going to look like? And are the funds there for me? And one of the things that drove me wanting to do it a little earlier was, one, yes, funds were going to be there. But two, more importantly, it was, boating's a pretty active endeavor. If I want to do it, you got to be younger rather than older. And there comes a point when you're not going to be able to do it anymore. And you need to think about that. And then also, and as you know, a good friend of ours, ended up retiring, a little later than he'd initially been thinking. But 11 months later, healthy as a horse, it seemed, when he retired. 11 months later, dead. And you realize that, and that probably accelerated my decision a little bit. None of us are promised tomorrow. And, you got in, if it's something you really want to do and you're in a position where you can afford to do it, it might make sense to do it now, as opposed to artificially waiting until, 65. Let me wait until I'm 65. It may be, those 3 years you gave away, as it were. You just don't ever get back.
You're right. And life is fragile, and we cannot guarantee that there will be a tomorrow. And you know my side of the story, and I can speak to that. So fully agree with you on that one. And so thank you for that message for our audience, for you guys listening. Keep this in perspective, plan ahead, design what your retirement may look like, and start planning for it. What Mike is describing is basically not a retirement. It is a stepping away from the corporate life, but it's pretty active, a transition. You remain active. You remain doing other activities. Some of them may involve some income. Some others may not, and that's why you're being disciplined enough to save all your life. And
or it's mostly expenses.
mostly expenses, hopefully some income. So anyway, Michael, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much again for accepting the invitation, for spending this time with our audience. Any last words before we go?
Thank you. It was great to be invited on. I've always loved having conversations with you, George. This has been as fun as the rest of them. If somebody gets something from this, wonderful. But I've had a blast having the conversation. It's nice to revisit your old friendships. This is the part that I talked about stepping away from was difficult. You don't get to have these sorts of conversations a lot. But thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be on your podcast.
Happy to have you on the show. Goodbye, Mike.
Thanks. See you, George.
And that's a wrap. We hope you've enjoyed today's episode of Leading Sales. Please make sure to subscribe to our podcast in your favorite platform. And don't forget to visit our page, leadingsales-podcast.com, for more resources on the art, science, and the dynamics between leadership and sales. Until our next episode.